Hey everybody, it's Overkill here with another Warhammer faction focus. So today we are taking a look at the nomadic Beastmen. So yeah, the characteristics of the Beastmen, they are a very ambush focused army, and that's representative on the tabletop as well because they have a special ambush rule where they have to bring a unit on the tabletop, and then they can bring a unit of equal size in ambush. And what that means is that the parent unit basically can be deployed, and then you roll, and if you get a multitude of different options, either your opponent chooses where your unit comes on, it comes on the random sides, or you choose where it comes on depending on what you rolled, and it can come in from the flanks of the enemy, it can come in behind the enemy. So basically, I believe in Total War Warhammer, if the Beastmen are playable, they're going to have the guerrilla deployment, just like the Celts and Attila, so that should be interesting. Now, the Beastmen are nomadic, meaning that in Total War Warhammer, they will be hordes. They don't have settlements at all. They will be hordes. All they do is encamp and move within a few days. They camp down for a while and then move again. So they will be hordes, just like Chaos. So that's going to be interesting. They have solid infantry in the form of the Gores, backed up by Ungores, Elite Bestigores, or Beastigores. I'll go with Beastigores. I've had people tell me it's that, even though it's not spelled that way. Powerful chariots, great lords and characters, and horrifying monsters. Like Skaven, Beastmen are obsessed with personal gain. A leader of a Beastman herd will always be dealing with usurpers. Expect low loyalty unless you prove yourself to be strong. They're one of the 3 Chaos-aligned factions, the others being the Chaos Warriors and the Demons of Chaos. And they are a bloodthirsty race. Anything above Ungores will be frenzied most of the time, making the Beastmen very dangerous. So yeah, the Beastmen occupy parts of the entire world, so I can't really talk about geography. They just live in the forests of the entire world. So I've decided to go more in depth with their society and religion, just to make up for not mentioning that. But this doesn't mean this makes it clear that the Beastmen don't have to be in the first game. They are not just an old world race. That's where they started from, but they have spread to the entire world, so CA can implement them in any of the games. Of course, a lot of the Beastmen herds are in the old world, and I'll have a map up here. There is a map of where the beast herds are, but as you can see from the map, there are huge herds everywhere, so they could implement them at any time, and it would work basically. So for Beastman society, as we mentioned earlier, the Beastmen build no cities. For order and construction are just completely they're unknown to them. They hate it. It's the complete opposite. They roam far and wide, following the scent of fresh meat and hunting down whatever wanders into the ancient hunting grounds that the Beastmen patrol. All the lands of the old world are regarded as these very same hunting grounds. It has always been so. Since the coming of chaos in a distant and legendary age, the Beastmen are tough and strong, for they must compete with the unimaginable horrors that haunt the woods. When a halt is called, which means the horde just settles for a bit, the Beastmen establish temporary sites from which to launch their merciless invasions of the surrounding territory. After these violent events, the Beastmen would then return to their sites and celebrate their victories in overt displays of feasting and brawling. Being highly nomadic, the tribe usually stay in one place for only a short period of time before moving on to find another suitable site in their hunting grounds. Beastmen warbands will often roam for hundreds of miles before setting up camp again, frequently battling over other Beastmen for their choicest spots. Now, something that's going to be interesting about the Beastmen is that they have created beast paths in the forest. So this could be a mechanic implemented into Total War Warhammer where Beastmen can just travel through forests very easily, whereas other armies cannot. Who knows? They might even be able to go through impassable forests. I'm not quite sure how that'll play out, but basically what a beast path is, it's been used by war herds so many times that there's literally a rut put through the forest that they can travel through, and no one dares to travel on them other than Beastmen, because of course they will just be killed and eaten probably if they try to. But it could be interesting in Total Warhammer if they give this an ability where they can move through forests very easily. That would be quite cool. The Beastmen follow a 2-part social hierarchy divided between the overall prowess of a Beastman, as well as what kind of breed that particular Beastman is. Those that possess exceptional strength and bear the greatest blessings of the dark gods, such as magnificent curling horns, occupy the highest echelons of the tribe. Those beastmen that possess small horns or none at all are always below those that do so. Hence, each war herd is led by the strongest and most bestial among their numbers, whom are known collectively as beast lords. These primitive chieftains occupy the apex of tribal authority. It is his absolute right to rule as he pleases, provided that he has the strength to back it up. To maintain his position, he has to continually fight off challenges from his many jealous and power-hungry subordinates. He makes a totem from the pelts of those he has defeated to prove his right to rule, making his personal banner a gory record of his deeds and conquests. One day, though, a challenger will come who is stronger, younger, and far more vigorous than the current ruler, and then the chieftain's own hide will hang bleeding in the wind from the challenger's totem. From here, this vicious cycle is repeated time and time again, forever. Status within a beast tribe is typically regulated by the strongest individuals within the group. Those wishing to obtain a higher position simply have to challenge an opponent of higher status in a brutal and often fatal duel. The only exception is the Ungors and Brays, those beastmen or other mutants who are not graced with the horns that are the most distinctive feature of this race. No Gore or horned beastman would consent to being ruled by an Ungor or Bray, no matter how skilled or powerful the lesser beastman might be. In any case, such a situation never occurs in practice. Ungors and Brays are simply weaker and less physically imposing than Gores. So yeah, the hierarchy basically goes Brays, Ungors, Gores, Bestigors, and Beast Lords. But there are multiple breeds inside those. For example, there's like 4 or 5 different breeds of Gore, for example. So yeah, but we'll get into the actual important ones when we talk about the roster. A lot of them don't actually have anything representing them on the tabletop, so it's not a big deal. Some powerful Gores have too much ambition to be willing to serve as a Bestigor, or Beastigor, and force their way up the hierarchy still further. At this point, these Gore leaders are known by many names such as Beast Lords, Foe Renders, Gougehorns, War Gores, Bane Beasts, and Bane Gores. From here, the hierarchy becomes more complex. These are not merely local titles, but precise statements of rank. So we move on to religion. So the Beastmen all worship the gods of chaos as the one true divine powers of the world. They are the product of their corruption, and as such are wholly dedicated to the spreading of their will to all lands of the old world and beyond. As these beastmen pursue their endless hunt against all civilization, some beastmen commit such acts of savagery and bloodshed that the attention of the dark gods are turned their way. Ordinarily, the ruinous powers pay little heed to the deeds of the beastmen, knowing that the children of chaos will enact their will regardless of any gifts or rewards offered. The beastmen are utterly enthralled to the magnificence of chaos, and are thus totally free of any constraints imposed by these malign gods upon their thoughts and actions. They do as they please and, in doing so, serve chaos with every shred of their being. Though they do not truly comprehend it, the beastmen are a vital part of the ruinous power's eternal quest to subsume the world in a roiling, turbulent tide of unreasoning change and war. It is the beastmen that tear down the elegant elven waystones that hold the power of chaos in check and replace them with herd stones, primitive shrines that corrupts the lands around them. It is the beastmen that hunt down and kill those who would otherwise remain out of the reach of the chaos gods. It is the beastmen who plague the civilizations of mankind, ensuring that their people shall not progress past their primitive states for centuries to come. So it is that the Cloven Ones remain at the forefront of the war against order and light, a war that only continues to escalate to apocalyptic proportions. Campsites are often set up around the sacred herd stones that are scattered throughout the dark forests of the old world, sometimes referred to as a chaos heart. Herd stones are sacred to the beastmen, and all manner of offerings are left there to appease and earn the favor of the gods. Weapons, armor, the banners of vanquished foes, and the corpses of mutilated enemies can all be found piled around the base of these stones. To gather the war bands, a raging signal fire is lit in the center of the herd stone circle. Often, shamans throw mind-altering herbs upon the blaze, sending up great swaths of strangely colored smoke curling into the sky. This fire is stoked with wood and carrion, and left to burn for days on end. Over the following nights, other beastmen will slowly gather at the sacred stones, attracted by the fire and the smell of burning fat. Each arriving chieftain scratches his name or mark onto the central stone in the crude beastman version of the Dark Tongue, known simply as the Beast Tongue, and as warband sets up camp. It is at the herd stones that most of the important celebrations and festivals of the beastmen take place. They are the rallying points where warbands can meet and join together without fighting, breaking out constantly. They are also the place for feasting, most importantly the ritualistic Champions Feast, where the flesh of slain chieftains is consumed by the herd. So we talked about religion, so now we can move on to the roster. So let's do so right now. So first off, you see the roster on the screen. I chose, for the legendary lords, there are only 4. There's only 4 options, but one of them probably won't make it into the game, so I'll get to him in a second. We have Kazrak, One Eye, we have Malagor, the Dark Omen, Torrox, the Brass Bull, and I have Gorthor, the Beast Lord. Now, you may be wondering why Gorthor has a question mark next to him. Well, Gorthor has been dead for hundreds of years, and from what we've seen so far, no long dead characters are in Total War Warhammer, so he probably won't be in. The other 3 might be the Beastmen Legendary Lords, but it would be cool to see him, and I will talk about him a little bit once we get down to the Legendary Lord section. But first, let's talk about Lords. So first off, we have a Beast Lord. Now, Beast Lords are the head of the war herds. They're going to be your basic Lord, basically. They are the highest ranking, of course, Gore or Beast of Gore in their tribe. So that means they are the strongest. So these guys are going to be really strong in melee, of course. And they're going to be absolute beasts to have around. And of course, it'll also make all the other warriors fight harder because of his presence and such. So, yeah, you can see him on the screen. We then have a Doom Bull. Now, Doom Bulls are special, and they're a different breed of Beastmen altogether. Now, Minotaurs, this is what it is. It's a leader of a Minotaur tribe. Now, Minotaurs are a separate breed of Beastmen, as I mentioned. They're huge, hulking beasts, and you can see from the model he's quite big. So you have to be quite special to lead a Minotaur tribe. So the Doom Bulls are the absolute largest and strongest of all Minotaurs in the tribe, of course. And they are just going to be absolute powerhouses. These guys are going to be able... You could send a Doom Bull right into an enemy line and just break right through it and then follow up the rest of your Beastmen army. That's how powerful they're going to be. Those two-handed axes that they have are just going to be absolute beasts. They're going to be swinging those around, killing loads of people all at the same time. It's going to be really cool. We then have the Great Bray Shamans, which are going to be your first caster, your Lord level caster. Now, they have access to quite a few different lores, those being Beasts, Death, Shadow, and their own lore, the lore of the Wild. So they're going to have access to a lot of different lores. In Total War Warhammer, we don't know if they'll be able to use multiple lores. We've seen from the Vampire Accounts live stream on the 15th that Manfred has access to 2 lores, and he can switch between them during the battle. So I don't know if these Lord level characters are going to be able to change the lore that they use, but who knows? It might be interesting. Actually, no, no. On the tabletop, these kind of guys can only choose 1 lore. That was a mistake. But yeah, there's him. He's going to be the most powerful caster you can have at the Lord level. So for heroes, we have just the same 3 again, only with different names, essentially. A Wargore is just a lower level Beast Lord. So he'll act as kind of like your champion from older games. We have the Bray Shaman, which is going to be your priest magic caster, essentially. And a Gore Bull. So a Gore Bull is just a smaller Doom Bull, essentially. So yeah, not much to really say about them. They're all just lower ranking. The Bray Shaman is just the same as a Great Bray Shaman. It's just that he doesn't have access to as many lores, I believe. Let me... Nope, they actually have the access. He actually has the access to the same lores as the Great Bray Shaman. It's just, of course, he won't be as powerful. So, very interesting. But again, they're just the same. They're just the same as the 3. They're just weaker, and they have different names, essentially. So we now move on to the actual army. So first off, we have melee infantry, and we have Ungors. Now, Ungors are a breed of beastmen that are more human-like than beast. You can see from their models that they look quite human, except they have the lower half of like a goat or anything really, and they don't have much horns, so they're not really respected by the rest of their tribes, and as such, they are used as fodder basically. They'll be sent first into a fight, and they usually get soaked up. Or of course, sometimes the Gores are just too crazy. They'll take the front, and Ungors can be used as a flanking force. There is that as well, but you can see them. They can be armed with hand weapons and spears, so there may be 2 weapons of Ungors. Then we have Gores, and this is the just the bulk of what a Beastman army will be. Are these guys. Now they are the basic infantry. They're very powerful. They're definitely tougher than, or they're definitely stronger than just an average human. So this being their basic infantry is going to be really good for them. as they will be very powerful, and against human factions they're going to be very dangerous. And yeah, they're just gonna be pretty cool. Then we then have the elite Beastigores. Now these are Gores that have proven themselves or are just tougher than normal Gores. So they have heavy armor, and they have two-handed axes. So these guys are going to be like more of a heavy shock infantry. You just charge them in, they're just going to swing those two-handed axes around, just chopping people to bits. Yeah, you can charge them into a line, and they should be able to break through pretty easily. They're going to be really cool, and you can see their models are just absolutely amazing looking. We then move on to ranged infantry, and there's only one unit, and that is Ungor Raiders. Now this is just Ungors with bows. So these are going to be your skirmishers. You have some archers at your disposal as the Beastmen. They should be pretty useful because you can just use them to harass enemies before you charge in and such. And who knows, with the ambush rule, they might have a hidden ability or something so that people don't particularly target them. They might stay hidden if they shoot and all that. That would be quite interesting. But again, I don't know. We'll have to see when they are added to the games. We then have melee monstrous infantry. So first we have Minotaurs. Now Minotaurs are another breed of beastmen, and they are just absolutely huge, as I mentioned before. You can see the pictures of them now. These are going to be absolute shock infantry, basically. You're going to run them into the front of an enemy, or the back if you want to be sneaky with them, I guess. And they'll just bowl through people. Think of trolls and ogres, basically, and Minotaurs are basically on the same scale. They use giant hand weapons. They have big, it's going to be quite interesting, big axes and crude swords and such. They're just going to absolutely carve through people, but of course they have no armor, so ranged weapons will be dangerous to them, and of course they won't be as fast as some other they won't be as fast as some of the other units, so they'll be trailing behind a little bit, but they should be really cool to see, and of course they'll be really dangerous. So we then have Harpies. Now they're not really monstrous in the fact that they're big, but they're not really normal, so I just put them in monstrous infantry, whatever. But Harpies are the same as the Dark Elf ones, essentially. They are these very evil, weird, if you could call them women, I suppose, that can fly, and they're basically just a harassing force for enemy ranged and artillery units. They don't have much use against actual melee infantry, as they could potentially just get wrecked, basically. So they're going to be swooping in from above, taking out archers and artillery crews. So that's going to be their use. We then have Chaos Spawn. Now Chaos Spawn are a unit that all the Chaos factions have access to. Maybe not the demons. The demons, I think, do get Chaos Spawn, but we aren't talking about them. Chaos Spawn are literally just disgustingly mutated humans, or anything. It could be anything under all that just disease, like just that corrupted flesh and but these are going to be a shock-ish infantry. They're of course going to freak people out because it's a big chaos abomination, so people are going to be quite afraid of them if they charge into them and just start lashing around killing everybody. So they're going to be shock kind of terror unit, so they're going to be pretty cool, and they're also very gross looking, so I can imagine how well CA is going to represent them. We then move on to monstrous cavalry. So first we have Centaurs. Now, they're not quite cavalry because it's... Think of what are they called? I can't quite think of it. The thing from mythology, the horseman thing. But think of that only with beastmen. You can see they're quite cool. So they're not quite cavalry, but they're going to play that role. So these guys are going to be charging around with their long spears, just absolutely devastating everybody. They're going to be more of a shock cavalry than a melee because they're not armored. And they just have their spears, really. So against infantry and even other cavalry, they might be a little bit weak. Of course, they'll do lots of damage, but they might not win every engagement. But as shock cavalry, these guys can just pummel into the rear of units, and the mix of their lower body and their spears, they can just rip people apart. It's going to be quite interesting. So then after the Centaurs, we have the Tusk-Gore Chariot. Now, Tusk-Gores are chaos warped boars that are found in the forest that the Beastmen occupy, and they have been turned into beasts of war, essentially. They are going to be pulling this chariot with Beastmen on the back, that are just going to be chopping people up as they charge through. And of course, taking a boar, which is already a dangerous creature, and corrupting it with chaos is just going to make it absolutely insane. They're going to be charging through units, just absolutely killing people, just running right into them. It's going to be quite cool. We then have the Razor Gore Chariot. Now, a Razor Gore is just way, way, way more far gone than a Tuskgore. They're way bigger. They are more corrupted. They don't have any skin. They're pure muscle. Their entire body has been covered. It's just muscle. There's no skin. So that's going to be quite scary. And of course, they're going to be a lot tougher. And the charge is just going to be absolutely devastating if you have multiples of these chariots. It's just going to rip through enemy units. It's going to be absolutely crazy. Looking forward to seeing them. So then we move on to monsters. So first we have Warhounds. And this is another unit that they share with the Chaos Warriors. These Warhounds are just corrupted, hounds essentially, that are going to be super fast. And they're just going to absolutely be excellent at killing artillery and ranged crews. They're going to be able to cross the battlefield at lightning speeds, faster than any cavalry. And they're just going to be absolutely devastating against weakly armed opponents. So looking forward to seeing them. We then have a Razor Gore Herd. So if you thought a Razor Gore Chariot wasn't enough, you can have a unit of Razor Gores. So that's going to be crazy. Charging them into a unit, they're just going to flatten everybody and stomp all over everybody as your main army comes in to finish off the job, essentially. And you can see that they're just absolutely crazy looking. So we then move on to the actual beasts, like the crazy monsters that the Beastmen have. The first being the Cygor. Now, the Cygor is a distant cousin of the Minotaur, but because they hail from the most tainted of all the realms of the old world, they have diverged greatly from their kin. They are huge, hideously malformed giants, similar in form to Minotaurs, yet each possessed of but a single eye in the center of its forehead. Through this eye, the Cygor is cursed to see not the material realm that mortals perceive, but the ever-shifting winds of chaos as they blow through and around the indistinct ghostly shapes that populate their world. Assailed by such visions since birth, Cygors are all quite mad. So these are Beastmen giants that see the realms of chaos, and they're just absolutely terrifying. They have these giant rocks that they carry around, that they throw around, and they're quite a bane to enemy wizards, as they can see the wizards clearer than anybody else as they focus the winds of magic. That's what they see. So they can see the winds of magic being pulled towards this wizard. And they can actually, on the tabletop, they can actually stop wizards from casting spells, as they are just horrified by this beast that knows about him being knows his presence in the winds of chaos, the winds of magic and such. It's quite interesting. So yeah, the Cygor is going to be quite terrifying. Just in a role of just charging into enemy units alone, he'll be good enough. So it's going to be quite interesting to see him. We then next have the Gorgon, which is quite similar. Now, when the Beastmen go to war, they are accompanied by sickening fiends that have grown to impossible dimensions on a diet of raw flesh and warping magic. The Gorgon is such a beast. A many-limbed ox-headed slaughterer possessed of an urgent need to devour and destroy. A near-mythical creature even amongst the war herds themselves. It is well that these blood brutes are so rare, for even one Gorgon can consume an entire Beastman tribe in a single frenzied and terrifying night. You can see that these guys are huge, and they have 4 arms. They have, from the picture I'm seeing, they have 2 normal arms and 2 bladed arms. So, can you imagine that, running in and swinging those arms around? In the tabletop, they can swallow people whole. So they can literally have a killing blow attack, which in the tabletop negates all wounds, and it can just kill somebody outright. So you can use this against a hero and just swallow them. So that's going to be interesting. And eating people gives his wounds back. And on the tabletop, wounds is akin to health points of something in other games and such. So him eating people makes him tougher and restores his health. So look out for these guys, basically. They're going to be absolutely brutal. We then have giants. Now, we've talked about giants before in a few armies, but we'll just talk about them again. They are just monstrous humanoids with boundless strength and there's a huge appetite for violence, flesh, and alcohol. They are most encountered in the far north of the world, being fond of cold, rocky climes. However, some of them do make the deep forest their home, while others descend from their lairs in the world's edge or middle mountains to join the bands of beastmen. Those that live in the forest are a particularly vile example of their breed. Their skin is often covered in green and brown mold, fungus, and moss, while their long beards are matted and tangled with ivy and creepers. So, yeah. Some of them are even hairy. There's a picture in the actual Beastmen army book of a hairy giant which has huge horns as well. So you can see that he'd probably be quite he'd probably be quite popular in the Beastmen tribes. That's for sure. And yeah, it's quite interesting. It'll be cool to see giants. We've seen giants before in the Ambush of the Thundering Falls. Think of that, only a more corrupted, chaos-ish one with hair and horns and such, and accompanying beastmen, of course. So finally, for monsters, we have the most interesting and most horrifying of all, the Jabberslythe. Now, they are amongst the most ancient and foul of all the creatures of the deep forest. They are truly repugnant to look upon, having such grotesque and twisted features that even the clearest pools of water will not offer up their reflection. A sickening fusion of toad, sludge drake, and a many-limbed insect. The Jabberslythe encompasses all that is unwholesome and vile about nature and magnifies it 100-fold. Ungainly and clumsy creatures, Jabberslythes have mutated the better to catch agile prey, such as the flittering spites that buzz around their lairs or the occasional ungor who strays too close. They have a thick, sticky, proboscis-like tongue that they can shoot out in the blink of an eye, capable of ensnaring and pulling a creature as large as a horse into the Jabberslythe's gaping mouth when it retracts. Under their hooded eyes gleams a predatory intelligence, and in place of blood they have stinking violent bile that spurts out from the slightest wound in great gouts of hissing black fluid, burning anything it touches. Hiding from a Jabberslythe is no defense. They have rudimentary wings that allow them short bursts of ungainly flight. Their vorpal claws can slice through oak, and they are terribly persistent when prey is in sight. So these are going to be terrifying. Enemy units just get wounded just by being in the aura of it. It drives people insane. So on the tabletop, it kills people by driving them insane, which actually means they just leave. So models are removed just by being around the thing if they fail a test. And of course, in combat, even the slightest wound is going to make blood spurt out on the people that caused it. And it's just absolutely violent, a violent acid. It's going to melt through people essentially. So it's going to be quite interesting to see and quite dangerous as well. You can see from the model, this thing is just absolutely disgusting looking. So yeah, guys, that is the roster. So now we can move on to the legendaries. So first off, we have Khazrak One-Eye. Now, Khazrak One-Eye is one of the most legendary Beastmen Beast Lords in recent history. A being of such horrific reputation and possessing of a ruthless cunning far above that of his bestial kin, Khazrak the One-Eye is an eternal threat upon the human lands of the Drakkwald Forest. He has plagued that cursed region for several years, descending without warning and then slipping away into the shadows once more. By the normal intellectual standards of Beastmen, Khazrak has a unique and adept ability to control and harness the unruly spirit of the herd, and devise simple but effective battle plans in order to win the battles. He is so unlike the vast majority of his kind, with a patient and cunning mind at odds with the normal headstrong nature of his fallow race. Khazrak's warband roams the Drakkwald, terrorizing the townships and roads. Never before has a Beastman leader proven so elusive to retribution that not even the Elector Count of Middenland could ever capture and subdue the rampaging beast. No one is spared in Khazrak's attacks, his superbly trained warhounds chasing down the few who manage to escape the war herd, tearing them to bloody scraps of bone and flesh. It is said that so long as Khazrak lives, the Drakkwald will forever be plagued by strife and conflict. So, yeah, quite interesting. I'm not quite sure if CA could even implement a faction leader for the Beastmen, as they are spread out all over the world, and no one is really the leader. So it will be quite interesting, to say the least, if they actually implement a faction leader. But I'm not quite sure who it would even be. It would be between Khazrak and Malagor. But anyway, Khazrak is just an absolute beast, and so he lost his eye to Count Boris Todbringer of Middenheim's Runefang. So later on, when they clashed again, he actually gouged out the Count's eyes in spite, and then let him run away, or let him live to fight another day. And it is said that Khazrak enjoys testing his might against the Count. So that's quite interesting. So maybe in maybe in Total War Warhammer there will be a mechanic about that. His personal hatred of Middenheim. That would be quite interesting. But yeah, he's going to be an interesting dude. So we then have Malagor, the Dark Omen. He is a darkly winged figure of nightmares and destruction, revered by the Beastmen, but feared above all by the superstitious of mankind. To all of humanity, Malagor is a harbinger of the downfall of all they hold dear. Considered by the cult of Sigmar the epitome of sin due to his many blasphemies, a sighting of Malagor is the most terrifying portent of all. He is the winged fiend that will rise from the benighted forests and challenge the gods of the old world. He is the devil rendered in woodcut in ancient tomes kept under lock and key, lest the terrible secrets within blast the sanity of any who read them. From the moment of his birth, it was obvious that Malagor was blessed by the dark gods, for he was possessed of a pair of feathered pinions as black as the night. Though Malagor is a Bray shaman, he does not reserve his counsel to any single chieftain. Instead, his whisperings steer the course of the entire Beastman race, visiting the herdstones and chaos shrines across the great forests, and enacting rituals so blasphemous that even the other Bray shamans dare not voice him. So yeah, if anything, Malagor does have more of a right to be the faction leader than Khazrak, just from that one statement. The fact that he offers his wisdom to all of the Beastmen tribes. But it's going to be interesting. Malagor has access to the lore of beasts, death, shadow, and the wild, as he is a great Bray shaman. So he'll be a very powerful wizard, and of course, being able to fly, he'll be quite interesting. He's going to be very dangerous, essentially. Looking forward to seeing him in the game. We then have Torax, the Brass Bull. Now, Torax was a chieftain of a fearsome Minotaur tribe, and he proved his superiority over the other creatures of the forest by slaying and devouring them so much that the ground beneath his feet was forever damp with the blood of his enemies. One night, an emissary of the dark gods entered the mortal realm, crawling from the remains of one of Torax's rivals. The demon was filled with dark energy and met the gaze of Torax with his hollow black eyes. However, before it could open its mouth to speak, it had its head ripped off and swallowed whole by the bloodthirsty Doom Bull. A moment passed, and then Torax was seized by a terrible vision of the world filled with blood and corpses. His body shook and spasmed. He roared and screamed until he drew his rune-tortured axes and slew every member of his tribe. For a year and a day he rampaged across the land, killing every creature unfortunate enough to get in his way. His kills include Beastmen tribes, witch covens, caravans of ogre mercenaries, empire patrols, imperious knights, and two-headed giants. Finally, Torax came to the Vale of Lightburg, where he killed so many citizens of the empire that he created a river of blood. Completely exhausted, Torax collapsed. He would have died if it were not for the attentions of the gods of chaos. They still had a use for him. So Torax was reborn in the form of living brass. He could never tire or grow weary of the rage that was consuming him. He became all but immune to the weapons of his enemies, except for an area of flesh on his throat that remains vulnerable. An expert sword thrust or arrow shot could slay him instantly. Such is the price of spiting a demon. The legend of Torax spreads across Talabeclan. The tales speak of the brass bull marching at the head of an army of minotaurs, the column of armored monstrosities stretching for a mile behind him. Wherever the army goes, it leaves behind naught but blood and ruin. However, the most terrifying part of the legend is the direction that the army is taking, straight towards Talabheim. So, Torax is going to be absolutely crazy. Being completely brass, as his name would imply, he's just going to be near impenetrable. So you can charge him at the head of Minotaur charges, essentially, and just crash through the enemy ranks and just absolutely destroy them, just leaving blood everywhere. But of course, it did mention his weakness, which is his throat. Now, his transformation into brass was not complete, so he still has his fleshy, very weak throat. So of course, he'll be trying to guard that, but I'm not sure if they'll add that, if they'll have that in the game at all. Probably not, as it is something quite, quite complex to have his throat as a kill point. But in the lore, that is his weakness, is his throat. So if you can get close enough to him or shoot him with an arrow in the throat, that is a way to kill him. But he's going to be quite crazy. And there isn't a real model for him, so I'm showing you a model that's a mix between a Minotaur and a Juggernaut, a Chaos Juggernaut. But it plays the part quite well. It looks quite cool. And just imagine a Minotaur that's completely brass, essentially, if that's not good enough for you. And that's what he is. So then finally we have a possible legendary lord in the form of Gorthor. Now, where Khazrak is the current greatest beast lord, essentially, Gorthor was once the greatest beastman to ever live. Not just a beast lord, but the greatest beastman to ever live. Over 1,000 years ago, during the time of the Crusades, his warband ravaged the forests of the Empire and all but destroyed the provinces of Ostland and Hochland. And his name can still be found on some of the most ancient herdstones across the region. There have been many beast lords who have united tribes into mighty war herds, but Gorthor was unique among his kind, for he possessed one thing that all others have lacked. He had vision, and the sheer animalistic will to sear it into the minds of his followers. Gorthor was convinced that the gods had selected him as their emissary, that he was destined to control the forests in their name. Such was his fervor in battle, he would sometimes be surrounded by a corona of dark energy, which would protect him or strike out at his foes, a sure sign to other beastmen that the gods truly favored him. With great strength of arm and cunning, he fought his way through the ranks of Gors to become a chieftain. But his sheer intensity never left him, growing in strength to match his ever-increasing power. So, just from that, like, if they put Gorthor in the game, he would be the faction leader. But he's been dead for hundreds of years. And this is where the controversy of if CA are going to give you dead characters as legendary lords, throwing out the sake of continuity by having the dead characters actually playable. Because Gorthor would be absolutely amazing, as he is the most powerful beastman to ever live. And he would clearly be the faction leader if he was in the game. But again, he's been dead for a long time, so I'm not quite sure what they'll do. He would be quite interesting to have, and he's also unique from the other beastmen that he has a mount, because he goes into battle on either a Tuskor or a Razor Gore chariot. It would be so obvious for him to be like the best legendary lord for them, but god damn it, GW, you had to kill him instead of having him be alive at this time. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what they'll do with him, but it would be quite nice to see him. Leave your thoughts down below. Do you think they'll have Gorthor as a legendary lord? Let me know. But yeah, guys, that's the end of the video. I've went through all the things that I can for the Beastmen. I'm looking forward to seeing them in the game. They are going to be a very devastating enemy for the Empire once they're added. So it's basically going to be like the Sassanids and the White Huns for Attila. The Sassanids were like, there's nothing can stop us, even though Chaos is kicking Empire's ass. But, you know, they're relative terms. And then the Beastmen are going to be added in, and Empire's just going to be, oh, well, shit, we have hordes everywhere to deal with. GG. But yeah. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you learned a little bit about the Beastmen. Hopefully you are excited to see them. And again, if you have any thoughts on who could be legendary lords, or, well, not even who could be legendary lords, because I've already shown all these characters that I told you were the only lord choices that are characters. All the others are heroes, and so far we haven't had any heroes in the legendary lord spot. So I don't know, but either way, if you think someone is cool enough to be a legendary lord that's a hero, please be sure to tell me down in the comments below. But yeah, this has been Overkill as always, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye, guys.